Hello everyone, and yes, we have finally arrived at the last section of chapter 16. Let's start, shall we? It was good and all that intellectuals were coming with all these philosophies, but what about the material world? Wasn't science supposed to help that first? Luckily for us, science's importance increased even more during the 17th century, when new scientific societies started taking place and a new scientific method came to life. Francis Bacon was an Englishman who revolutionized science by coming up with a new way of acquiring knowledge that impacted English scientists. He did read the works of many important philosophers before him, but he came to reject Copernicus and Kepler and misunderstood Galileo. In his unfinished work, The Great Instauration, he called out to his fellow thinkers to start over and rebuild science on a proper basis, since he believed that everyone had proceeded incorrectly up until now. His new scientific method was based on that scientists should start by collecting specific data and then pull out general conclusions from them. He knew what his new method could do, since he wanted science to contribute to the mechanical arts like agriculture and trade. Bacon also wanted to create some sort of power that would enable humans to conquer nature. Coming back to Descartes, as I said in the last video, he came up with the philosophy of rationalism, but he also emphasized on the use of deduction and mathematical logic to draw conclusions. His conclusions complemented Bacon's theory that Isaac Newton will combine both ideas together to give birth to a new scientific methodology. This new system started with experiments and observations from which general concepts were then deduced. However, this new methodology could not explain why something happened or the purpose behind it, and that is how religion was able to keep its importance in society. Now, this is where those scientific societies made their appearances. The first scientific society made its appearance in Italy, but those from France and England dominated Europe for a while. The one in England was called the English Royal Society and was formally recognized by King Charles II in 1662, but did not receive much governmental support. The one in France was called the French Royal Academy of Sciences and was given full recognition by King Louis XIV in 1666 and gave his full support. The purpose of both societies was to value the importance of scientific research. The Royal Society wanted to investigate improvements in technology for industries. The French Academy collected tools and machines. Both published weekly journals in which they showed scientific results from several researches, expanding the news of scientific activities around Europe. It was a great way for people to become aware of new discoveries in their world. Science and society. The relationship between these two terms was not a simple one. For years, science had been a part of the Western minds, but took some time before people actually started accepting it as a rational and superior system. For example, science could have been used in the exploitation of new resources. Like Galileo said, an alliance between science and mathematics could be used in the construction of bridges, but he also stressed that science was only for the higher thinkers and not for the common people. This kind of explained why science was only a part of the wealthy elite culture at a time where culture was being separated between the rich and the common. Another field in which science could be beneficial was politics, where people would use it to meet their ends. For example, during the English Revolution, the Puritans used new technologies to accomplish their mission of renewing their society in fear of the apocalypse. Kings and princes would also use the advances of science for military power, since the new gunpowder gave new meanings to ballistics and metallurgy. The advances in science were good and all, but what did religion have to say about it? It is normal that history would start to see a conflict between science and the church, who will stick to its beliefs that religion explained everything. The natural philosophers tried, however, to draw lines because religion couldn't explain everything. For example, Galileo could not understand how the church believed everything that the biblical text said about nature and its physical reality. Where here's the reason. The church believed theories like the Aristotelian Ptolemaic system, since it corresponded well with the assertion that humans were at the center of the universe. Unfortunately for them, the scientific beliefs continue to triumph and Europe continue on its secular path. However, there are two particular people who will try to bring religion back. Benedict de Spinoza was a philosopher who did not accept Descartes' rational theorem and the separation of the mind and body, since it failed to illustrate God's infinity. To him, God was not just a creator, but was present everywhere in the world. In his book, The Ethics Demonstrated in the Geometrical Manner, published shortly after his death, he argued that humans were a part of God, or the universal order, as other natural things. This means that everything was one. He also emphasized that God was responsible for everything. For example, the storms and earthquakes were triggered by his anger. Spinoza also stated that he would consider his actions the same way he would connect with objects. Another person who wanted to unite Christianity with science was the famous Blaise Pascal, who was a French scientist. He was an excellent mathematician and scientist who devised a calculating machine and came up with a theory of chance or probability. We all know Pascal's triangle. Despite his scientific background, he decided to follow a more religious path after having a mystical vision in 1654. He had planned on writing an apology for the Christian religion, but died before finishing it. However, some notes were left behind, and the finished product became the famous Pensées, which is thoughts in French. In his book, Pascal tried to bring the rationalists back to Christianity by using their reasons and emotions. He argued that humans were weak and often deceived by their own desires, but they were thinkers at least. If we came to depend on reason, then religion would become a laughing matter, and Pascal did not like that, since he believed that Christianity was the only religion that understood the position of humans. He also states that the rational reasons people came up with failed to portray God's place in nature, since he was everywhere. Unfortunately, he had failed to unite both parts together, and Europe continued on its path of secularization. And this is the end of chapter 16, The Scientific Revolution. I hope all these videos were very useful to you, and I bid you good luck for your test.